Two. Welcome, everyone, to a Football Friday edition of Pack Your Play with Q. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. We are brought to you by our very good friends over at Play It Again Sports. You heard me talk about them all week long. Main thing is when you go in there, you'll get some good dollar, some good value right on your exchange with your merchandise as well. If you mentioned, you heard it right here, BYP with Q, you'll get 10% taken off your order, 10% added to your buy as well. 1450 Herfield Road in Deptford, New Jersey. Check them out online. PlayItAgainSports.com. Put in a location, New Jersey. With that, the college football season is just, as we like to say, rolling along. And our guy from On3 Sports, Nick Costco, at Nick Costco 59, kind enough to join us on a Friday edition of BYP to break down some of these games and to really highlight what's going on college football landscape. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, Rich. We're about to be in November. I know not this weekend, but starting next weekend, we're in November, which means we're in the final stretch of the regular season. And it's almost time for college football playoff rankings officially. No longer just talk and projections or predictions. We actually get an additional poll to talk about as we get down to the good stuff here in college football.
Yeah, listen, you're starting to see teams as well. You know, we see it in the NFL. You start to kind of separate yourself. We're seeing it probably over the last week or so in college football. I mean, look, you mentioned it last week when we were talking about a team in Penn State, who, by the way, is laying about 30-something odd points against Indiana. They suffer their first loss of the season, and it really comes down to, we got on Harbaugh for how many years for not being able to beat certain teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
The conversation, I feel as though with Penn State is, all right, listen, man, when are you going to be able to turn around and beat Ohio State? They weren't able to do it. Everyone's kind of killing Franklin. They're looking at the contract. They're looking at the money. Where are you at right now with Penn State?
Penn State's right where I thought they would be. I thought they were going to be the third best team in that division. Now, that sounds awful on paper, especially for a team of Penn State's caliber and a program of Penn State's caliber. But when you're playing against Michigan and Ohio State every single season, and until next year there are no more divisions, and I know there's going to be so many more teams in the Big Ten. Obviously, with the West Coast teams coming in, now you're going to have, I think it's 18 now, if memory serves correctly, with the four Pac-12 teams coming in. So there are no more divisions. So now you don't have to worry about that year to year. But I mean, James Franklin and Penn State, they have not beaten Ohio State since 2016. That was the last time they got to a Big Ten championship game. And, of course, Franklin and the Nittany Lions won that Big Ten championship game. But everyone points to that year as that was the peak, but also it was still a huge missed opportunity because they had two losses. They missed out on the college football playoff, which I believe we talked about last week as well, how that was the peak of his tenure so far. And since then, have there been victories over Michigan? Sure, but the Ohio State thing has eluded him we're going on now on the, if you're going to round up, we're getting close to a decade since he's beaten Ohio State. And now, is James Franklin the right guy for Penn State? I know everyone's asking that question. I think he is. I think he's a very solid coach, but is he going to be the guy who's going to win them a national championship? I think they're going to not be able to find anybody better. I don't see where you're going to go to get a better coach. And I think what Penn State fans need to pump the brakes a little bit with is, you're going to get the expanded playoff next year. Now, I know that's not the right consolation prize you want to hear, right, especially since you just lost to Ohio State on the road in a awful offensive game, by the way. And if Penn State had any semblance of offense where they are projected to be this year, or what we've seen in the past, they might come away with a win, and now they're undefeated. And now you're talking about, okay, is it going to be Penn State or Michigan now coming out of that division and getting to the playoffs? So I wouldn't panic if you're Penn State. It just stinks, I think, for them if Penn State cannot beat Ohio State. Now, they still have a game against Michigan. Who knows? That maybe they knock off Michigan and then they send the whole division for a tailspin where you basically get a three-way tie, and then you have to go through the virtue of tiebreakers. But if you're Penn State, I mean, I know you can psychoanalyze James Franklin. You can get down to the nitty-gritty of what he does as a coach, what he does as a recruiter. But this program is better off than almost, I want to say, 95% of the programs in the country. They're still number 10 in the latest AP poll. They have an outside shot at the playoff if they beat Michigan, of course. But other than that, I think this is pretty much where you expect them to be. Now, I think going in my last point on Penn State, I think going into the year, people thought, okay, this is their best team and their best chance to get past Michigan and Ohio State and get back to the Big Ten title game. But then as they were winning, everyone starts reversing course a little bit. People who were saying that, most of them would come back and say, well, maybe we jumped the gun, even though they're winning, but maybe they're now like, we'll go back to they're a year away. It's 2024 now, where we really have to look at it. And I think you can, though, because of, as I mentioned before, the expanded playoff, where in any other year, I think you could probably get all three of these Big Ten teams in a 12-team field anyway as wild card. One's a champion, and then the other two are wild cards. So I wouldn't panic yet if I were Penn State.
You've got a battle of 2 6-1 squads. Number 8 Oregon, number 13 Utah. Right now, that line is sitting at 6.5. Oregon, they lost that high-scoring game against Washington. Then they come back, and not the most prettiest aesthetically pleasing game against Washington State, but be that as it may, they did get the win to somewhat regroup. And then you're looking at Utah, and all of a sudden, boom, this resurgent of this offense. They won 2 straight after losing to, I believe it was Oregon State that they actually lost to for their first loss this season. So that line right around 6.5. I think for my money right now, first loss on a Friday, as I look at this, this has the makings to be one of those wild 38-35 type of games. I mean, you're talking about the resurgent offense right now with Utah. You got this big clash right now. As I mentioned, I've seen the line as high as 7 Oregon favorite. So let's just say we hang our hat between 6.5, 7. Where are you leaning in this one?
I got to lean Utah right now, only because they are at home. It's one of the toughest places to play in America. And you look at what Oregon's done, and, you can, I guess, critique that last win over Washington State. Oh, they're coming off the loss to Washington. Right. They didn't look that great against Washington. Now, Washington State's no slouch. I know they're not ranked right now, but that's a pretty good football team, as the Pac-12 is so deep this year. You got quarterback Cameron Ward back there. That's a high-scoring offense coached by Jake Dickert and crew. So, and obviously, just a side note, don't forget about Washington. They only won 15-7 over Arizona State. Michael Penix Jr. I think he threw 3 picks, and he didn't throw one. They didn't score an offensive touchdown in that game, and they're still undefeated, and they're still talking about it as a playoff team. So, in the case of Utah, this is not going to be an Oregon USC type of game where you're going, or I should say like a Colorado USC type of game where you have offense, and you have. Look at the other situation of Oregon against Colorado. 2 high-flying offenses, right? That's what Utah can score now all of a sudden. But now Oregon is going to meet their match in terms of the physicality. Oregon-Washington was a high-scoring affair. Washington just made a couple extra plays. And obviously, people can question Dan Lanning's decisions for the Ducks. But at this point, now you're going to get, I would say, the most physical Pac-12 game you're going to see all year between Oregon and Utah, because Utah does this every single year, and they've proven it over the last 2 years, winning 2 straight Pac-12 titles. They're the most physical team in this conference. They embody head coach Kyle Whittingham, who I'm a huge fan of. I know Urban Meyer said he's probably the best coach in America right now. Now, I guess depending upon what kind of metrics you're looking at, you probably could say that. I would say that in certain metrics, sure. If I had a son, I'd want him to go play for Kyle Whittingham. Absolutely. He's one of the best at motivating his guys, making something out of completely nothing. I mean, we're talking about a guy in Bryson Barnes, their quarterback. He was 4th and 3rd string this year at one point. And as Whittingham likes to call him, he's a big pig farmer. Like, you got Caleb Williams over there, making millions of dollars off the NIL deals. And Bryson Barnes is a pig farmer. That's what he was. He had to come back to college to do this. And, they already lost their starting quarterback, Cam Rising, not coming back this year, their top tight end. They lost a couple more guys over the last couple of weeks, including that, even in that win last week. So, but I do like Utah because that home field advantage is the best. And I think they are they're playing way above where they were projected, especially with losing all these guys. I think Oregon is probably more talented on paper if you just look at it from a strict paper standpoint. But you look at 2 physical teams like this. I just think Utah is a little bit more physical. Now the offense is starting to catch fire. You beat USC. I think now it just goes to show you that, if you can beat down a team or wear down a team on defense and obviously grind it out on offense, but be able to score 30-plus points in back-to-back games with Bryson Barnes as your quarterback, I think they're doing something right. And you know me, I don't like those big road favorites. I know Oregon's at 6.5, if not 7, as a favorite on the road. So give me Utah at home, and I would say to win this one outright. And then now you have to talk about Oregon's out of the playoff mix if this happens, and then you have to start talking about, all right, is Utah actually going to three-peat here in the Pac-12? Who are they going to face? Are they going to play Washington? Are they going to play USC? Like, who are they going to play now? And I think at that point, if Utah does win this game, Rich, with what they have at their disposal. Now that magic may run out the very next week, especially if they win this week. But you have to start asking the question, is Kyle Whittingham good enough? And it seems like he is, to actually get this team to a playoff in a year where it seems like everything is going upside down.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, this game is huge because it's got major Pac-12 title implications. And you mentioned Utah with their offense, 34 plus, 463 yards. So you're talking about in back-to-back wins on games. You're talking about a team that you love their physicality, but yet offensively, they can get up and down the field. I mean, this
Absolutely.
game does.
So, yeah, they can now beat you multiple ways where you didn't think that was going to be possible this year. You figured, all right, they're a team that's going to be very run heavy, and I believe they lost their running back too. So I'm talking about Utah's losing everybody. They're all dropping like flies, and they're still winning football games with guys converting from defense to offense and vice versa. They're finding walk-ons that came to the team 2 years ago, all of a sudden giving them scholarships as well, and all of a sudden they are contributing. So what Kyle Whittingham has done, and I think it's now getting more national recognition because this is the third year in a row where they're in the conference title race, but it's under different circumstances this year. I think they're now starting to realize of how good of a coach this is. I mean, he's been there for 2 decades. I mean, let's not forget that he's been here forever, and he's just now getting the recognition I think he deserves, and that's why I'm going to favor Utah this week.
You got 22nd ranked Duke 5-2. My Louisville Cardinals 6-1. We didn't hear from you when they beat Notre Dame, and then I was silent last week when they lost to Pitt. That's college football, laying 4.5.
I think that was mutual respect out of you and I, just to say, well, let's not push the buttons a little bit week to week here.
I like Louisville. Listen, their offense, it's not like it's not going to blow you away, right? It really isn't. But I'll tell you what they don't do. The running backs are sound. The quarterback gives the ball up a little more, but which I don't like. They can run the football. You're averaging about 4.7 yards a carry. That to me speaks volumes. I mean, their lead back is averaging close to 8 a carry, Jordan. So they've got a ton of depth. To me, this is a game where you just might ground and pound and win the battle, line of scrimmage in the trenches. I like Duke. It's been a nice story, but 4.5, I wish it was a touch lower, maybe 3.5, 4.5 scares me. But do I believe they're 7 better than Duke? I do. And again, here's a big game because they're looking to both overcome losses, stay in the ACC championship picture.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you on Louisville this week. I do think the Cardinals are the better football team. And again, you have to look at Duke from the lens of, is Riley Leonard going to play? And he's still uncertain for Saturday's game. I know he gave it a go against Florida State, had to exit the game. And now I know there's people that are arguing out there that maybe Duke has a better chance to win if he stays in the game. Well, of course, he's your starting quarterback, but I don't think Duke's beating Florida State. Last week, I know Florida State has had their, I guess, quote unquote, shaky moments this year, but that's matchup specific. And if you're looking at this game specifically, where Duke wants to keep their title hopes alive, at least in terms of the ACC, they have to win this football game. While Louisville was obviously the great story to start the season, they lost one game, and now they came back, and now they're 6-1. They're still a top 20 team. You mentioned how the offense does not really blow you away now, which is surprising to me, considering Jeff Brom, who's in his first year back at his alma mater with the Cardinals. He brought over Jack Plummer, who was his former quarterback at Purdue. I think he was at Cal for a year, and he brought him over to Louisville this year. Now, that's a guy that you would figure is going to light it up. Now, he has a shade under 2,000 yards this year, but he's turned the ball over. He's thrown 8 picks this year. So
Bingo.
that's what's concerning. So I don't think they want to be totally gunslinger, especially against a physical team like Duke. So they're going to keep it on the ground with Jordan. He's over 600 yards this year. He's got 8 touchdowns on the ground as well. So I think Louisville's offense is very well balanced, but it's about the turnover department. And if I would say if the Cardinals limit the mistakes this week, they should win this game. Maybe not handily, but I think they're going to control the game against Duke. Now, again, Duke is a hard-nosed physical football team, as we mentioned before. I believe a couple times this year, and Mike Elko is doing a heck of a job with the Blue Devils at a primarily basketball school. So I think what he's doing is great, but I think Louisville's just a little bit better right now. And I think Duke's time will come maybe in another year or so, if it ever comes. But I think Louisville they are exceeding expectations right now, and I do expect it to continue here through Saturday.
Yeah, listen, I can't get gung-ho about putting up 56, I think, against Murray State, 21 against Indiana, 56 against Boston College. Okay, but then you come back, you score 13, and then you score 33. That was their best performance of the season against Notre Dame. They couldn't do much offensively against Pitt, held to 21. But you mentioned the quarterback, right? You love that he's thrown for close to 2,000 yards and, 16, 17, 18 touchdowns. some of the picks are ill-advised. I can't have that. I think they rely more on the ground game. I do like them. I'm not sure they're going to cover the number or not, but and Duke, to their credit, has been a really nice story. I have to ask you. We'll get to Michigan in a second, but listen, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about your Rutgers. What's going on there? What's with the drinking water in Piscataway?
I don't know. It's bowl eligible water, I would say. So hey, hats off to Greg Schiano. I believe I actually said on this show as well, in addition to other places, I said that this team is probably going to win 4 to 5 games again this year. You'll probably see improvement, but 5 wins was kind of my peak there. Now, I didn't expect Michigan State to be the dumpster fire it is this year. I basically expected Northwestern would be a win. The Indiana game would be a win, and I forget what else I picked. I figured they would win their non-conference games, over the Virginia Techs, obviously over Wagner, and who else did they play? It's on the tip of my tongue, but still, I figured the non-conference schedule wasn't really going to be a problem. And then, you have competitive games. You at least beat Indiana. You're going to beat Northwestern. So you get 2 Big Ten wins there. And then, going into the year, I was like, well, they're not going to beat any of the big 3. They might not even beat Michigan State this year, although that could be a toss-up. And I believe that's the game I circled saying that was the one where if they're going to go bowling this year, they have to beat Michigan State.
Man. Gutsy win.
It was, and they look like typical old Rutgers, and they're never going to get over the hump in the Big Ten after the 1 year, their debut year, where they actually were over 500 and traditionally made the bowl game the traditional route. So I said, same old Rutgers is at home. It's a crappy environment right now with the rain coming down, the fans are leaving, and they come all the way back in the fourth quarter. They erased that 24-6 deficit. So hats off to Greg Schiano for pushing all the right buttons. I mean, he was always the right hire to bring back for the program a couple of years ago. You just were waiting for that moment of, all right, it's actually starting. The tide is turning. That was the moment right there. Then they go on the road against Indiana. There were some shaky spots, but they pull away, and on a bad passing day for them, Gavin Wimsatt, who knew he could run that fast and run for 80-yard touchdown and have over 100 yards on the ground. Considering he's more of a pocket pass type of guy, but they've used him a lot running this year. The offense is clicking, and now it's not a world beater by any means, but that defense is elite right now. I believe it's a top 25 defense pretty much across all metrics. And again, it helps with the schedule they've played. But
next week's a different animal.
Next week's a different animal. And hey, you held Michigan, even with some sign stealing, until only 24 offensive points, their lowest output this year by the Wolverines offense. So Rutgers, hats off to them. As an alum and a de facto employee of the school as well, I'm very thrilled for the football team to at least have a spot in the postseason this year. Now, how many more games are they going to win? I don't know. You got Ohio State and Penn State left in the schedule. You have Iowa on the road at Kinnick Stadium, Maryland as well. Those are your last 4 games. Now, with the way Maryland and Iowa have looked, especially Iowa on offense, are those 2 winnable games? I'd say yes. So maybe the peak now is an 8-4 season, and you only lose to the big 3, and obviously Wisconsin out west. So basically the big four brands in the Big Ten. I would say that would be more than exceeding expectations for the Scarlet Knights, and get them a pretty darn good bowl game as well.
So they've got Ohio State. I do have to ask you one question about Ohio State, because he's from my backyard, Mount Laurel, where I grew up in South Jersey. Kyle McCord. I mean, look what's going on with Williams. Some of these other quarterbacks that we were talking about banged up, some injuries. I mean, is McCord, is he a potential sleeper for the Heisman, or can we at least, will he get invited?
I don't know about invited. I would think what's going to get him invited, and I know his stat. I would have to look up his stats right off the bat.
1,900 yards, 12 touchdowns, 1 pick.
Right. So he doesn't turn the ball over. He didn't look great last week, and I think he was bailed out by Marvin Harrison Jr., who is I would say the best, easily the best receiver in college football. I know he had a slow start to the year, but that dude is going to be the top receiver taken. Now, all respect to guys like Roma Dunze over at Washington and some others. I think like Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson down at Florida State as well, just the guys off the top of my head. But
you think he can be the top overall pick, Harrison?
Marvin Harrison Jr., it's going to depend on who's there. I think Caleb Williams is the shoe-in for that, but I think someone's going to take a quarterback, and it's going to be Caleb Williams. Yeah. But I would say if this weren't a quarterback heavy draft, I would say you have to largely consider that man, Marvin Harrison Jr., to be the number 1 overall pick. And I'm not going to call him Maserati Marv, a la Gus Johnson. I think that nickname is going to last about 1 week. But as far as your McCord question, he's very solid. I think he's a little bit better than I was going to give him credit for this season. I think he started to pick it up. He didn't look great last week. I mean, nobody looked great last week in that Ohio State-Penn State game. But I think for McCord to be in the running, if not at least invited to the trophy presentation, I think Ohio State does have to go undefeated in the regular season. I think he needs to be Michigan. Now his stats are pretty good. He's not lighting the world on fire in terms of the amount of touchdowns he's throwing, but the yardage is up there. The turnovers are way down. He doesn't really turn the ball over pretty much at all. So that's really good. But even a guy like Caleb Williams, who's had a bad stretch of 2 games right here, he's still basically my odds-on favorite, besides a guy like Michael Penix Jr., who also had a bad game. So, the whole conversation could be turned over on its head. It seemed like all the top quarterbacks, and I hate that it's only a quarterback award pretty much at this point, but even all the top quarterbacks, Michael Penix Jr., you look at Drake May, Caleb Williams, they've all had these bad stretches, whether it be 1 or 2 games where you're like, okay, they weren't a shoe-in. So could McCord get there? Yes, but he has to play better than he did last week. And I think the deciding factor is going to be, can Kyle McCord go beat Michigan on the road in Ann Arbor and lead Ohio State at minimum to the Big Ten title game, if not the playoff? I think he would definitely be invited at that point.
But you mentioned that. Now, if they keep,
and that's another guy.
He's got short odds
as a Michigan stand right now, Rich. I almost totally forgot about JJ McCarthy. JJ McCarthy, I think, has a better chance of Heisman
right now.
Yeah, I think he became the new odds-on favorite this week. I think JJ McCarthy is definitely going to be invited at this rate, because he has been absolutely outstanding. And then I wrote something earlier this week for On 3. He had 3 interceptions against Bowling Green. He talked about how that game kind of turned his season around. That was his worst game. I think it's the worst game he's ever played. His only 3 interceptions of the season, Rich, are from that game. Since then, he has, I believe it's 16 touchdowns, 0 picks, and then, however many yards. But he's been essentially perfect before and after that game. That was the game that kind of turned the season around earlier on in the year. And now I think he is a shoe-in to be a Heisman finalist, and I think he should be the favorite right now. As it stands right now, I should say.
You saw what he did against Michigan State: 21 of 27, 77% completion percentage, 287, 4 touchdowns, no picks, and a 216 passer rating. Oh, by the way, that was pretty much an easy day for him, if you will. Right now, again, shortest odds plus 250, Penix Jr. plus 300, and then just for kind of shits and giggles, Bo Nix plus 1,800, Marvin Harrison Jr. plus 2,500.
I'm seeing pretty short odds for Jaden Daniels as well over at LSU, because I think he's quietly having one of the best seasons of anybody in college football. I think it's just because LSU has been kind of forgotten about after the Florida State loss, and the fact that everyone's talking about Alabama and Georgia again. Yep. Yeah, his odds are right up there. He's one of the top. He's one of the favorites right now, along with McCarthy and Penix Jr.
I feel as though Caleb Williams played himself out of the.
I think he did. I think those last 2 games kind of, I don't want to say guaranteed him to not win it, but with already 2 losses, if you're USC, you might not make the Pac-12 title game at this point, depending upon other results. The playoff is out of the question now too, so that definitely hurts his chances. I'm not going to say he can't win a second Heisman and only be the second guy to ever do that, because I think everybody going into the year, I think even before those 2 losses, everyone thought that through 6 games, the defense stinks, but USC is still undefeated and he's still lighting the world on fire. This guy, through half a season, is going to win a second Heisman Trophy. The last 2 games have changed things now, so against Notre Dame and Utah, respectively. So is he totally out of it? No, but USC would have to win 4 in a row, be 10-2, and have a spot in the Pac-12 title game. They'd have to win the Pac-12 title game, in my mind, and I believe that would be before the Heisman Trophy is announced, if my memory serves correctly. So if that team's Pac-12 champs, they're 11-2, and I guess they're going to miss the playoff, but they'll go to a New Year's Six Bowl. I think Caleb Williams will be right back in the thick of things to win the Heisman.
All right, quickly to close it out, how about TCU with the little dummy signals, right, against Michigan? Apparently they knew about it. Like we talked about it, kind of like with the Mel Tucker situation when MSU, more stuff comes out, same stuff with Michigan now, right? More allegations, more information, more details are going to follow. Think about this. They were a 7.5 point dog and they wound up putting 51 up, 51-45 in that win. So, again, that's the measure of revenge, right? what, I mean, where do we go from here with
I
this
mean,
whole?
this whole story is driving me nuts because I don't know about your true feelings on sign stealing in general. I don't care. I don't. I do not care about if Michigan's stealing signs. Now, by the letter of the law, with the way the NCAA has it and the way college football is set up compared to high school and the NFL, yeah, what Connor Stallions allegedly did, it by law, by rule, is illegal. You can't
But
do it.
define letter, but define. Okay, you're talking about sign stealing. If it's a 3rd and 6, and all of a sudden I see the quarterback go like this and like that, and I know he's going to check off to the pass or maybe check off to the run. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm a defender, if I start to stack the box, does that not give me an advantage? You still have to complete and execute the play, but
Well, exactly. And I think you're exactly echoing Deion Sanders. I mean, speaking of Deion Sanders, I got to rock the Coach Prime shirt right here because I'm still on the Buffalo bandwagon right here. I don't care what anybody says. But that I mean, just to echo what Deion said, he said that this week. He said I could mail you my entire game plan. Still got to stop it. Still got to stop it. And I think that's what I think a lot of football people think about it. I think I'm not going to call them just straight Michigan haters, the people that want to see Michigan fail, but I hate to phrase it this way, but I think those are the people that want this to come down as like a massive punishment.
Of course they do, because of Harbaugh.
Is it really that big of an advantage to me? I mean,
well, let me ask you a question. Hold on. Let me ask you a question. Let me cut you off. What if this was Alabama?
I think I completely swept under the rug. No one cares. No one cares. They'll question Nick Saban. They'll be like,
you don't think that head coach is? If this was Alabama and Saban,
finish your point. I think this is less of a deal if it's Nick Saban.
So you think this is solely because the NCAA can't stand Jim Harbaugh?
I think it's part of the reason, yeah. But I don't. I've never seen. And I get the reports are coming out that this is such an elaborate scheme. I think if you read some of the other reports about Connor Stallions and how this guy was a Michigan fanatic. Like this guy wanted to run the program via like a 600-page Google Doc, and his Michigan manifesto, he called it. To me, this sounds like a crazed dude who went above and beyond to, albeit by NCAA rules, illegally get signs to help out Michigan win football games.
He's a big fan.
If he wasn't there, Rich, do you honestly believe Michigan still doesn't have the success they had the last 2 years? They to me, like this is their peak right now.
You think you think it's a witch hunt?
Partially,
for lack of a
yes.
better term.
Partially, yes. And I hate to use witch hunt because it's.
So let me ask you, but hold on a second, because
go ahead.
So if that's the case, then so it's a double-edged sword. If you're the NCAA, how much money do you think Harbaugh, Michigan has made the NCAA?
Which is why I'm surprised they're actually like going through like a full-fledged investigation right now, because would you rather, I mean, again, just look back to last year, and I'll use TCU as an example. So TCU had the inkling that Michigan's probably sign stealing, which is legal, by the way. You're allowed to sign steal, only, obviously in game. And if you notice something on the exchange game film, that's fine. But how is TCU apparently, one of many schools that kind of knew something was going on? You mean to tell me TCU was the only team to use dummy signals and throw Michigan off? Come on, man. This is really that big of a deal?
Other teams and schools knew they were doing it, but maybe didn't have 100% concrete evidence, but they knew.
But even if you have the inkling, Rich, if you have the inkling, wouldn't you want to do what TCU did? So I think
throw them off their guard instead of complain.
I think this is a complete failure on everybody else who played Michigan. And then going back to your money question about the double-edged sword about the NCAA, and obviously, there's no concrete evidence to this, but obviously the NCAA would definitely prefer that the NCAA and the college football playoff and in the networks. You mean to tell me they preferred TCU to play Georgia last year? Absolutely not. They wanted Michigan in that national championship game. It's not even. I don't care if you hate Michigan or you love Michigan. You want to see Michigan play for a national title in last year's playoff against Georgia, or hell, I said dream scenario for all of college football. You had Michigan and Ohio State rematch in the national championship game last year. It was a possibility. Michigan blew the game. Ohio State was a field goal away. If those scenarios are reversed right there, Rich, you have Michigan and Ohio State, the game part 2 in 2022, and it could be the highest rated national championship game in history, I would say. Yeah. So yes, I think there is something at stake with Michigan not being well represented on the national stage. So if penalties come out in season, which would be unprecedented, I'd be totally stunned. I'd be stunned. And I think it is partially that people don't like Jim Harbaugh because he pushes the envelope, and you have to bounce off of this last NCAA investigation as well, where they went into the supposed violations from the COVID season, where, the NCAA said it wasn't about Jim Harbaugh buying a recruit a cheeseburger, but of course it was. And they he had a self-imposed suspension. So it's like, I'm going to give you, I'm going to scratch your back, scratch mine. And now this is coming out of nowhere. I think teams are they're grasping at straws right now because Michigan, as I said before, Michigan is at their peak right now. They weren't before 2021. They were knocking on the door, missed opportunities. 2021, last year and this year is this 3-year window of a national title window. Yeah. After this year, I don't think they're going to be as good. This is their last chance to win a national title.
Yeah, knock them down a peg. And you're right, it would have been a highly rated game. I mean, people would maybe sit there and say, I think it was 71 Oklahoma, Nebraska. They called it the greatest college game ever. I'll tell you who should have been stealing signs, your Philadelphia Phillies in Game 7.
My Philadelphia Phillies? I forgot I had the
You're a Red Sox fan, but still, what a choke job that just goes hand in hand.
As a guy who's basically a de facto Philly fan because by virtue of the area, and obviously if baseball I feel is the only sport where you could have a quote unquote second team in the other league. The Phillies absolutely blew that. I was dumbfounded. I was absolutely dumbfounded. Now, am I distraught like most diehard Philly fans? Of course not, because my baseball team was out of the running by the end of August. So it's whatever. But they absolutely did blow that. Yes. But our guy Mad Dog, I'm glad he ran with the shit there and did not retire.
He had to walk it back. I heard he turned around when Torrey started talking. He goes, after 12 minutes, you think I'm going to retire, but he did have to walk it back a little bit.
I mean, he started walking it back after Game 6. Then Game 7 happened. And he's like, well, no. I only said radio, not TV.
You start to panic a little bit in that. Listen, it's baseball. Bats can go ice cold. Offenses can go.
And they did. The Phillies went ice cold in Game 6 and 7 at home. Best home field advantage in baseball. Not those two games when it mattered most.
What do you got going on with college, with high school football?
College, maybe one day. Tonight on this Friday, October 27th, as we're recording it, 6 p.m. tonight, Manalapan travels to Mainland Regional High School on Cape Atlantic Live. 6 p.m. tonight, first round of the South Jersey Group 4 sectional playoffs. So the quest for a state title begins tonight officially. So obviously all the teams all the sections are broken up into those 8-team brackets across the state and all 5 enrollment groups. So North 1, North 2, Central, and South. Mainland actually playing in an actual South Jersey sectional this year, unlike last year, last year's Central Jersey sectional champions. So we'll see how it goes. It's a loaded bracket for those in South Jersey. Number 1, Millville is also in this bracket. So it should be a nice few weeks of playoffs leading up to the state semis and, of course, the state finals. I believe that's going to carry us into December.
Yeah, I don't like the way it's set up, right? Because think about it. What's the biggest high school football game of the year? It's Thanksgiving. That's the tradition, especially in South Jersey, right?
Yeah, I mean, it used to be. There are barely any Thanksgiving games left in the state of New Jersey in terms of high school football, because the way the schedule has been.
That's my whole point.
Yeah,
that's my whole point.
It's very unfortunate. It is very unfortunate because even back before the schedule was changed, if you go back even just 10 plus years ago, Thanksgiving was there. So that was your last game unless you played for a sectional title. So all these sectional titles are going to be done within the next 3 weeks. So the sectional titles back then, this is before they moved up to state semis and, of course, overall state champions. But those games were the week after Thanksgiving.
Well, it also depended what group you were playing in, too. There were certain groups like Group 4, Group 5. I mean, I can only speak. I know this is Cape Atlantic, but we're talking Burlington, Camden County. You mentioned Millville. Millville Violin is the longest running high school rivalry Thanksgiving Day game.
I believe it's still one of the few that's left on the Thanksgiving Day schedule.
It was always set up though, high school game, then you go to the playoffs and states and whatnot. Now I don't know. But you're right. I mean, I actually been calling those games for so many years. The last 5 years ago, it was not even packed. I mean, think about it. It just was not even packed. And I know it's different.
It is unfortunate from the traditionalist standpoint, and I'm a traditionalist. I loved it. I played on Thanksgiving when I was at EHC. We played Mainland every year on EHC. Now they play at the beginning of the year, or they changed it back. I was talking to head coach Chuck Smith over at Mainland. He said we kind of wanted that game at the end of the year to end the regular season to kind of get that big game feel back, or because playing at the beginning of the year, mainly in the HC, is just weird. And not to go off on a tangent, but you mentioned Millville playing Violent on Thanksgiving, so they do play them at home this year, November 23rd. Okay. And I believe actually that is Thanksgiving Day. Sometimes they play on Wednesdays, which is weird. But you look at the playoffs tonight. If Millville wins the next 3 games, Rich, we're talking today, the 3rd and the 10th. They're sectional champions by November 10th. Okay. Then they would have a state semifinal game on November 17th.
Now, how does that?
If they win that, Rich, they won the state. This happened last year. They won the state title last year. They're going to win it on, let's just say, November 17th. They're going to go to state finals at Rutgers University 2 weeks from now, or 2 weeks from that date. They have a Thanksgiving game to play before the state championship game. So what are you going to do? Play all you're going to make it a JV game. It stinks.
That's the whole point. You're going to. It's almost like load management in high school football, high school sports. You're going to rest these guys
because that state final game is going to happen between December 1st and the 4th or something like that, or like even like a little bit later after that. So like you're going to have a game 6 days after your state semifinal game. Play the JV kids against Violent, who's been out of commission for at that point probably about 4 weeks not playing a game, and then you have to go back and play a state championship game. It
is what it is.
I like the idea, Rich, but it still needs a lot of fixing, the whole schedule.
100%.
Let's not get on a tangent here. This is Back Your Play.
Nick Costco. Check him out later this evening. Give him a follow on Twitter at Nick Costco 59 Cal _live sports as well. Does a great job with On 3 Sports, voice of RU Wrestling as well. Kind enough to join us on a Football Friday edition of BYP. Good luck with the game tonight. Enjoy all the college and the pro action over the weekend. We'll do it again next week, pal. Appreciate you.
Absolutely, Rich. Love it. Appreciate you.